Good evening. We're about to start the study session tonight for January the 11th of 2022. Gears are rolling by. Before we get started, I'm going to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to our country's flag. If you'd like to join me, please feel free to do so. Well, good evening, and got just a little quick agenda here, it looks like, so we're looking forward to that. I'm feeding back. I should not be feeding back. So Miss Bobby Kane, I think you're up.
Yeah, just
Coordinator presentation.
wanted to take just a second and introduce. I know Bobby was here in December sharing about Curriculum Guide, and tonight she's back to share with us about one of the positions. It was in a board meeting last spring when y'all were sharing with Dr. Phillips about the need for counselor coordinator, and Bobby came on this summer and has already done just amazing work to support our counselors and to streamline things and to coordinate things. And so she's going to share a little presentation with y'all about the work that our counselors are doing every day and the work that she's doing as counselor coordinator.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Thank you, Board. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. Again, my name is Bobby Jo Kane. I came on as the counselor coordinator back in July. And just to give you a quick brief history of myself, I started my career in education back in 2007. I was a teacher for 4 years, and during my time in the classroom, I just became really passionate about counseling and wanting to serve students in a different way. So I obtained my master's degree in counseling and have been serving the students of Sumner County for the last 9 years. I spent my first 3 years at Schaefer Middle School, and then the last 6 was at Hendersonville High School upon coming to this role. So first of all, I want to say thank you, guys. Honestly, from the time I saw this position posted to every time I go visit with a counselor in a school, the sentiment is always just thankfulness that this role even exists. And I really can't, and I've got a few counselors here tonight to talk with you as well, but it really is. Every time I go visit a school, even still now, it's just, that is the sentiment. It's just sincere gratefulness and thankfulness for the support that you created within this role. So thank you. My goal this evening is to leave you all today knowing what a school counselor does, and then also knowing how the school counselor supports how the school counselor coordinator supports our counselors. Counselors work through every obstacle a student is facing, and we find solutions to get them to the other side where they can attend, learn, and grow. So I'm going to start off with school counselors. So who are school counselors? School counselors are certified licensed counselor educators. We have master's degrees in school counseling, typically school counseling specific, or school counseling or counseling with a school setting endorsement. And we work to remove barriers to achievement and help all students succeed. I like to say that we bless the messy. We get in there with the student and we figure out how to help them work through the barrier. We talk a lot about removing barriers, and I'm sure we can all think of many, many different barriers that students face every day, and a lot of our counselors will share some of those with you. But we get in there and we help them work through the barrier, some of which will remain, but we teach them how to reframe it to not be a walled off obstacle, but something that they can step over or through to achieve their goals. We filter everything we do through, will this help the student attend, learn, and grow? So many things impact whether a student is able to attend physically and mentally, learn academically and socially, and grow current and future development, and maturity and opportunity. I'm going to start off by sharing with you all 3 of our best counselors in this county. We serve the student over the course of a child's academic career with a whole child approach. We all work within the same domains as you see on your screen, but the role looks different with each school and the different grade bands that we serve. Elementary school years set the foundation for developing the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary for children to become healthy, competent, and confident learners. Elementary school counselors have an impact on these years by providing education, prevention, and early identification and intervention. Elementary school counselors help their students achieve academic success, develop an understanding of career opportunities, and develop social and emotional skills in response to the issues they face. I'm excited to introduce to you my friend Mary Lass, who is a school counselor at Madison and Creek Elementary, and she's going to explain to you just a little bit more about what an elementary school counselor does.
Good evening, everybody.
Mary Lass. I've been a counselor at Madison Creek Elementary for 12 years now. I have the joy of being with a long-haired hippie, Terry Morgan, and the other hippie who doesn't have hair, John Duncan. And between the three
Of us, the Three Stooges, we managed to
run a really good school. It's shocking. I've been a counselor for over 20 years. I've worked in school systems. I worked in Metro at Winston High School
for 3 years as a high school counselor. I worked in Williamson County at Ravenwood High School for a couple years as a high school counselor. I've worked in rural, it's hard to say rural
schools in Georgia before I came to Tennessee, and now I'm in an elementary school. What in the world do elementary counselors even do? Y'all don't know how many times I hear that from people. What do you do? I'm an elementary school counselor. What do you do? They don't know.
What could you possibly do in an elementary school? So if you don't know, trust me, a lot of folks don't. So let me help you understand a little bit more. At Madison Creek, we're in Goodlettsville. There's around 640 students at Madison Creek. And I feel like my primary role there is any child that comes into the school and they're in a classroom and there's something going on, they're having some type of an issue.
And that issue is causing them not to be able to learn. Whether it's a security issue, they're not safe, or they're not being fed, whether
They have emotional issues, relational issues, academic, they're in a crisis, whatever their situation is, that teacher needs to have that child be supported in order for them to learn. So we're those people. So the teacher calls us. An example of what that looks like is a couple weeks ago, of course, these happen daily, but I had a teacher, as soon as I walked in the building, immediately sends me a message, I need you in my classroom. Go down to the classroom, there's a child that's distraught right off the bat, first thing in the morning. So, of course, the teacher comes out and says, I have no idea what's going on. This is not typical for this child. She keeps saying she doesn't know where her daddy is. She thinks daddy's not coming back. And I said, do you know anything about the history of this family? She goes, both parents are in the home. Like, this is not normal. So, of course, then I take the child then, and that teacher is free to do what they need to do with the rest of the students. So I get her to my office and start to interview and assess what is going on here. And in child speak. So in elementary, middle, and high, we don't use the same verbiage when we're talking to the students, and that's where our training comes in. How do you interview a 5-year-old versus a 17-year-old? That's a very large difference in skill set, okay? So how do you interview a child in a way that's not threatening to them, that's supportive and loving, but you need to get the answers that you need to get. And you can understand, those of you who remember having small children, it's not always a straight line. You're not always going to get a straight answer. You ask a question, you're not always going to get a direct answer. So you got to know how to kind of dance around, come from different directions, supporting and loving, holding a hand, getting some tissues, do you need a snack, whatever you need to do to help them feel comfortable. I have teddy bears and blankets in my office for that reason, so that they feel safe. So with this child, interview her and find out that parents had a major blowout the night before. She was in bed. They did not know that she heard them fighting, but she heard them fighting. They always hear them fighting, by the way. But they didn't know. She hears a door slam, and then everything gets quiet. She's so scared to come out of her room at that point, because when there's conflict and a child's in a traumatic experience, they're going to shut down, they're going to withdraw, they're not going to come out and say, what just happened, where's my daddy? They're not. So, of course, she stayed in her room. Mom didn't know she even heard the fight. Nobody knew what was going on. She didn't know what was going on. The next morning, the child just falls asleep. The next morning, the mother gets her up, gets her ready for school. Dad's nowhere in the house to be found. And the child, again, says nothing. And the mom puts her on the bus, sends her to school, and that's the condition that child lands in that morning. And this is where your school counselor comes in. So, of course, the child lands in that classroom, completely falls apart because now she's in a safe environment, and that's what schools are for a lot of these kids. If there's turmoil and crisis in the home, they come to school, there's consistency, there's structure, there's stability. I have a teacher that knows me, and I have friends, and I can fall apart here, and so then they do. And so then the teacher brings me in, and I get them down, and I start to assess what's going on. And with her particular situation, I did not feel she could continue with this in that classroom, wondering if her dad is dead or alive, or he's missing at that point, because the next morning dad was not there. So ended up reaching out and trying to call dad. Dad does not answer, nor does he have a voicemail that responds. And we run into that a lot as counselors, is when we try to reach out to the parents or the family, sometimes there's just not a response, or there's not a response that is appropriate. So then I try to reach out to mom. Mom does not answer, but I can leave a voicemail, thank goodness, because a lot of times that doesn't happen either, and now we've really got to figure out what's next. And so anyway, but mom does not call back for a long time. So I've got this child here. In the meantime, I've got another child bursting in, having a panic attack because she has a phobia of storms, and tornadoes are supposed to come. She's hearing the adults talk. These kids hear everything. They listen through vents, walls, everything. They hear everything. And I don't know why people think they don't hear them sitting in the back seat of a car when they're on their cell phone. Okay. There's some kind of invisible wall there that they don't hear. Okay, anyway, you get my point on that. So the child is there. My phobic child comes running in, panicking from storms. But this child I've worked with before, and I've been teaching her some coping skills and techniques to deal with her anxiety. So she immediately goes and grabs a blanket. She grabs her teddy bear, and she heads under the table of my office. I have a table and chairs there. And because that's the safest place when a tornado is under something, under a table. She knows this. So she's got all her supplies under there, and I immediately start coaching her through, show me your breathing, show me what you're doing with your hands. I have them count on their fingers. In elementary school, you have to be very tactile, and you have to use a lot of sensory things, because developmentally, they don't do well with abstract thought. It's got to be very, very concrete. And so to translate how do you manage anxiety to a 7-year-old, it's got to be very concrete. So we do certain things. And so anyway, I had her, she already kind of knew the drill, and she started doing them on her own. This other little girl that was in there thought under the table looked pretty cool at that time. Next thing you know, all three of us are under the table. And we're all sitting there, and I got both under each arm. We've got blankets, we've got teddy bears, and we're rocking. And then we're thinking, what's your favorite song? So I'm in there humming, and that is the life of an elementary school counselor in its purest form. You get in the floor with the kids, and you care for them wherever they're at. And so then it was time for our class to come in. And I have these two girls under the table, we're under there, and I'm like, great, what do I do now? And so my anxiety child, she ended up got herself together enough, and I said, do you feel comfortable going back to class? And she's, yes, Miss Lass, I can go back to class. Okay, so she puts up her stuff. The other little girl, I still have not heard back from mom. She's all but clinging to my leg. I'm like, I can't send her back to class. So she helps me teach my next 4 classes. And some of them were 4th graders and 5th graders, and she's in 2nd grade. But it got her mind off of what was going on. She was distracted. She felt like a helper. She felt empowered. And so she was my helper that day. After my classes were done for the day, mom finally did reach back out, and then had asked permission from her boss to get off work. So then we had to wait again to see if she would be able to come. So now this child is with me through other tasks and such, and eventually mom was able to come and get her. So then I needed to sit with that mom and go through, what just happened, but I didn't feel comfortable just releasing the child. I needed to describe to that mother the experience that the child had. So at that point, now I'm the mouthpiece for the child as a counselor, as an elementary counselor particularly. The child can't advocate for herself, so you need an adult to say, this child was terrified. When you fight, she hears you. And then she's in distress because the mom never went back and even asked if she was okay or even checked. The mom knows now. But I have to say it in a loving way because I have that parent in my building for a total of 6 years, from kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade. And alienating a parent is not the way to manage the situation, because I'm going to need them again in the future. So you have to manage it in a way that all feel loved, all feel supported, regardless of the decisions if you think are right or wrong. all have to be loved and supported, and so we kind of have to be a little bit savvy about how we manage that. Anyway, the child ended up going home with the mother, thank goodness. And then another role of the counselors after that is to follow up. So then the next morning I'm getting with that child to find out, what happened? And thankfully Dad ended up coming home. Mom and Dad kind of made things a little bit more peaceable in the home. So the child was in a much better state the next morning. And now I have to say, many times that's not the case. Sometimes Dad is gone. Sometimes Dad did get incarcerated, or Mom left, or what have you. And then that situation is ongoing. And then you pile that up, and you have 640 children with all these crises coming in. The counselor is extremely busy. I know a lot of people hear, oh, the counselors are so overwhelmed and they're so this. That's why. It's because, and life doesn't end. It just keeps going. Now, some of the other things that we do in an elementary school particularly is teach classes. And so I get to lay eyes on every student in that building once every 2 weeks. All 640 of them rotate through my office once every 2 weeks for their guidance class. And there is counseling standards that we teach, and we use our curriculum to get those standards across. And some of those things have to do with, of course, their mental and emotional health. The academics are being handled by the professionals in their classrooms. Those teachers are in Sumner County are top notch. I don't have to worry about so much about the academics. My job is to help educate the child on how to manage their emotions, their social skills, those kinds of things. How do you get along with each other? If you're stressed out, who can you go to? What kind of help can you get? And having them learn to speak up and advocate for themselves before they get to middle and high school, where the problems escalate and get a whole lot tougher to manage. We do lessons in growth mindset, mindfulness, resolving conflicts, accepting differences, brain science. We talked about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, and they get it. They understand it. Coping skills, how to be safe, safety rules, internet safety. We go over all of that stuff. And so that allows me to build a rapport with each child. They know me. I'm not just the stranger that comes and gets the crying child in the hallway. They know me by name. And so once every 2 weeks, they're coming through for their guidance class. I also offer small groups. Right now I'm running groups on divorce, grief, and stress. And this past fall, I ran 6 groups myself, and I had 2 other groups led by teachers that are trained to run some of these groups. They're more on the support level, not therapy groups, so teachers can be trained to actually lead a couple of these groups. And that serves, I do them in the fall and in the spring, so we serve about 50 to 60 kids every semester just with support groups. So I'm hoping that those will get a little bit more traction with some of the other schools as well. It can be very intimidating to think I have to teach classes and I got to manage crisis and now I've got to run these groups, but they're crucial. So this child in this circumstance, if her parents end up splitting up, then I would refer her and get her in my divorce small group where she can continue to get support. And then on the last page, it's just individual counseling. Again, any student can refer themselves. I have kindergartners that say, I need to see Miss Lass. Because in my guidance classes, I train them all. If you have a problem that's bigger than a kid problem, then you might need an adult to help you with it. And I'm the person to help you with it. They know me by name, and they know outside of my door, there's a place where they can fill out a paper, and those that can write can fill it out. Those that can't read or write just yet, they know they can tell their teacher. The teacher shoots me an email and says, such and such is asking to see you. And then I go down and I get that child. Now, sometimes the child just wants to tell me about her new tennis shoes, but sometimes that child is telling me something that I really, really needed to hear, and it's okay. We flesh it all out. All of it needs attention, and sometimes it's a 2-second quick thank you. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for telling me. And then I get on to the next kid and the next kid and the next situation. I get a lot of parent referrals. I get parents calling in asking me to meet with their child because something is going on. They're like, we have no idea what to do with her. We have no idea what to do with him. A lot of it is separation anxiety in elementary schools. Lots and lots of anxiety in elementary schools. With the pandemic, it's even on a more uptick, and people are fighting and having a lot more domestic issues at home, and the kids are bringing it into the building, and so there's a lot of anxiety, and parents don't know what to do with their own anxiety, much less how to navigate their child through that. So I meet with parents quite often and just teaching them techniques and referring them out to outside counseling services. Some of our schools have counselors in the building. They have a Centerstone therapist or a STARS counselor in the high school. I don't have one in my building, so I need to refer all of those out. Sometimes those appointments, they have to wait for weeks to get in. So in the meantime, I'm still meeting with that child and checking in and seeing and just trying to support them while they're waiting for more intensive help, if the parent follows through and gets the help. And that's always an issue too. So some of these issues end up being more chronic, and I have to come in periodically and manage different crises and different things along the way. Chronic absenteeism, behavior issues. We do have to do abuse reporting. These kids need to be safe, and whatever that, if we have to call Department of Children's Services and report something, then that's what we do. And then we work to support that child in the meantime within those requirements. And then counselors have lots of other assignments aside from all of that. I lead a school-wide Christmas assistance program. Seasonal affective disorder is a big real thing, and around Christmas time is a particularly difficult, stressful time for a lot of families. And it sounds like a frou-frou program that I get sponsors for children who are needy, but actually it takes so much stress off of some of these families that it is almost one of my biggest mental health programs is getting help for Christmas, and that is what happens. I'm also, because I'm a licensed administrator, I'm also an LEA rep in my building. I assist with IEP meetings when my administrators can't sit in. And also I'm on our school emergency team, our SET team. That's our medical response team. And of course, lesson planning. Some counselors are in charge of the 504 plans in their building. Some are building testing coordinators. They're in charge of SST process. Some do cafeteria duty. Some are on the specials teaching rotation. They do registration. They get records. They are registering new students, on and on and on. So the vast variety of skills that a counselor has to have is across a whole spectrum. And you definitely want your qualified people in those positions, and you also want your people who, if other things can be taken off their plate so that they can focus on those things, you then are having a person who is qualified to go in and address all these other crises and all these other things that are going on that need to be supported for that child to be able to learn in that classroom. And so that's what an elementary school counselor does. Thank you for your time.
Isn't she great? Oh, I just think she's awesome. This is actually her idea, bringing all of my friends up here. So I know. All right, middle school. Middle school students are characterized by rapid physical growth, curiosity about their world, and an emerging self-identity. Middle school counselors have an impact on these years by meeting them where they are and helping young adolescents maximize personal and academic understanding and achievement. I'm excited to introduce you to Dale Sadler, school counselor at Portland East Middle School.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Normally I'm in front of a crowd preaching on Sundays, but I'll try not to go too long this evening. But I am honored to be with you this evening. Despite the extra gray, that is me in the picture there. I do appreciate the invitation, and I'm honored to be speaking to you this evening. Dale Sadler, I'm the school counselor at Portland East Middle School. As has been said, I've been there since 2004. Really enjoy that position and the people that I work with. It's a great place to be. Professionally, I am a part-time minister. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist as well. I have an office in White House where I do counseling there. So people say, Dale, you got a lot of jobs. I say, yeah, but I just show up and talk to people. That's all I do. I'm so fairly good at that, I suppose. There's three areas that we focus on as counselors overall. This has been around for a long time: academics, occupations, and personal and social areas. These days it's focused a lot on by calling it social and emotional health, especially with the pandemic, with anxiety, other mental health issues on the rise. Those particular areas of social and emotional health have kind of ratcheted up, especially in the middle school, where, as Ms. Kane said, they come to us as small, lovely children, and by the time they leave in the 8th grade, a lot of them are bigger than I am. So there's a rapid amount of change in the middle school, and that especially with the social and emotional component. So that's a lot of where I focus on as the middle school counselor. I do help with academics, occupations, of course. Occupational awareness is a component as well, but primarily social and emotional health. And if we could look at this and how I engage these areas, the broadest being various programs. I'm going to talk about each of these. Also classroom guidance, group counseling, and individual counseling. And through this pyramid of sorts is how I address those various areas. Whenever you look at a school, they'll each have their own unique needs. And that might be because of where they're located, the clientele, the history of the school. And so, as a counselor, and I know the other counselors, my colleagues here tonight and others in the county, they look at the school, what does our school need? And then they try to meet those needs. One of the needs that I saw we had a few years ago was robotics. I am the robotics coach there. We're state champions last year. Very proud of that. Still working on that this year. But also several years ago, I started a video club. I have a hobby of editing videos. I did an attendance video for the county. Some of you may have seen that a few years ago. But we started that. Now we do video announcements. If we can get our equipment straight, we'll go back to video announcements. But that's one of the things that we do. And we used to produce videos on character education, that sort of thing. The kids would act in them. And also grant writing. I've written several grants for the school. We have the robotics team, but through a grant, we actually started a class. So every 6th grader, minus the band students, every 6th grader at Portland East goes through the robotics class. And a select few do make it to the team. But through grant writing, I've been able to start that class. For the last 5 years, I believe, I've earned the Tennessee Arts Commission grant. When we bring a professional drama group into the school to show a theatric presentation. This year we're doing it specifically for Black History Month. It's a play called Freedom Songs. Bright Star Theater Group is the name of them. Wonderful, wonderful group. And also this year I assisted our art teacher with a grant to get a slab roller. And that's a big art contraption that she'll be able to do a lot of good with. So grant writing, a need of the school. Testing, I'm the testing coordinator for TCAP. Anyway, Dr. Nagel does a lot of the, especially fall testing. I'm also the the 504 coordinator. I work with the Family Resource Center here at the county, which is a fantastic resource, I know, for our school and for many others that help with the weekly food packs. I distribute that, monthly food packs, and also, like Ms. Lass, I do the Christmas assistance program as well. So these are the unique needs of the school. They go across the board in a lot of ways, but in some ways they may not. Also, I do classroom guidance. These are just some of the topics that I cover. Bullying, how not to bully, actually. Mental health. Mental health, we have an outside group called Mental Health America. They come in periodically throughout the year and address mental health issues specifically. I'll cover proper online behavior. I'll cover vaping, conflict resolution, and anything that might be trending. If there's something up, going on with students, I'll go into the classroom and we'll have a lesson on that. Now, a lot of times guidance is difficult to gauge, but I have been able to gather data through my classrooms, and I do a pre-test and a post-test. And if you'll look here, 6th grade, I asked the question, is vaping not bad at all, or is it very bad? And it was a lot of graphs, so I tried to consolidate some of the results. But those who thought it was very bad, being 10, it actually almost doubled after the lesson. And then, especially starting in the 7th grade, resolving conflict, big component of 7th graders needing to learn how to resolve conflict. The pre-test you see in the blue, and then the post-test, you see there was growth there. And also in the 8th graders being confident in their conflict resolution skills, that also doubled. So just some data here. I try to use data and show what I'm doing in the classroom. Some of the things that we do cannot be measured. and I may talk briefly about that in just a moment. But whenever we can measure something, it's good to do that. I do care teams. Children are resilient and empowered. We have 5 total. 3 of them are mine. Miss Tucker, our 7th grade science teacher, who wanted to be a school counselor, is doing 2 others in the 7th grade. But my topic is resilience. And I've got this great workbook on resilience. And I chose that topic because whatever a child might be dealing with, they can gain something as we talk about resiliency. And you'll see the picture here is a coloring sheet that I did at our very first meeting back in the middle of October. And the question was, how do you cope with stress? Like, what happens to you? What is your bodily reaction to stress? And never, like, I get a sick stomach. Never, usually, sometimes, always. There was 5 choices. I can't remember the 4th. But it went from blue all the way over to red. So the more red you see, the more stress, the more difficult time the student has with coping with stress. So this is a visual representation of what many of our students go through on a regular basis. And they come to the care team, and one young lady told me, this is one thing I look forward to every week, is being able to come into our care team, being able to come into our group, not being judged, being able to say whatever they feel, because they can't do it at home. Miss Williams can't do it while she's talking about the Civil War, so they're able to come in here and talk about what's on their mind. And we're trying to get more blue into this coloring sheet right here, so we are working on that. But that's how our care teams look. I do individual counseling as well. We have QR codes in the building. When the students get their phones or have them in the morning, they can scan a QR code and refer themselves, or they can just stop by. We're the smallest middle school in the county, so they can stop by my office and refer themselves or a student, which is often how it happens. And of course, any adult can refer a student. I work on topics such as absenteeism, family and friends, crisis counseling, especially with middle schoolers. You'll talk to them one day, everything's fine. Next day, everything's fine. And the next day, it's blown up. So being available is a major component of middle school counselors, because you do have this new 7th grader, 6th grader, 8th grader with their new brains. They get new brains in middle school. They check them out in the library. It's their new adult brain that's no longer a child. It swaps over, and now it can think abstractly. And so now they're dealing with things brand new because they got this new adult brain. So we're our adult used loosely. So we help with crisis counseling quite a bit as well. And I help when the teachers can't. It cannot be overstated what our teachers do. But some things they can help with. They can't help with self-harm, with suicidal ideation. I see Tammy Elrod walking down the hallway shaking her head. I know something's going on, And so she'll come to me or other teachers, and they'll help out, do all that they can. Because I work with women, I work with mothers, okay? That's who I work with. And they know how to handle a lot of what these kids are going through. There ain't no doubt about it. I don't want to take that away from them at all. But they'll come to me and say, Dale, I just can't do this one. And so that's where I step in. I'll let you read that letter on your own. That's very insightful, because they'll bring letters like this to me and say, Dale, let's help them out. So that's what I end up doing with the resources that I have that are always available. We live in a great community up in Portland. Mr. Gregory knows that, and they're there to help our students in a big way. I'm the DCS reporting coordinator, and of course I will also refer out to Centerstone when appropriate. So thank you very much. Glad to be able to talk to you.
I'd like to ask you
Yes, ma'am.
something. What did you do with the Dear Santa letter? I know you said
Right.
communities.
Yeah, I do the Christmas Assistance Program, and this was actually kind of late in the year. It was right before we were going out on break, but I knew I had a resource. There was no doubt there. I called the mother and said, are you okay? And, talked to her, because you never know the reaction you're going to get. And she was shocked. She said she didn't know what to say. She she said the letter is completely true, but they lived with their parents, and but they would be fine. So they were taken care of. They did not need any help. But that was the girl's perception that they did, because she sees mom's working however many 10, 12 hours a day. I see my friends, their parents don't work. In middle school, they really start putting it together in an abstract way. So I called mom, but they were fine. Yeah, but
Well, I don't think they're fine if she's able to live with her brother.
yeah,
Makes me
well,
feel bad.
it's a sliding scale for sure. But they didn't need any outside help. I suppose her parents took care of Christmas and that sort of thing. So yeah, they didn't need help of that sort. Let's say that. Perhaps some other ways they could definitely use help, no doubt about it. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Anything else? No? All right. Thank you.
I would actually like to just make a comment as well. One of the things that you said on there was that anybody, when they see a need or so forth, can come to you and bring that. And I know with having students myself in middle school currently, that the relationship that I have with their middle school guidance counselor, I'm so thankful for. I know that my children are blessed that, their mom and dad are both in the same home and it's a stable environment and so forth for them, but children talk. And you hear things, and especially with social media now and so forth, they'll see things posted. And there's been a couple of occasions that I myself have heard my kids say something that is concerning, to which I'm able to go to the guidance counselor and just say, hey, are you aware of this? And there's been a couple of times that they weren't aware of it. And so I just encourage, I know we're having our meetings live streamed and so forth now, that if there's parents out there that hear something concerning from their student about another student, reach out to the guidance counselor or the principal to say, hey, you may already know this, but don't assume that they do.
Yeah, never.
Because there's just been a couple of times that I'm like, I'm assuming you are, but I just want to make sure. And they were like, we have no idea.
Most of the time we don't know.
And so then that gives them the opportunity to then follow up and stuff, because like I said, these are things that my kids are seeing either from conversations, from text messages, things being shared, like I said, on social media that, our school resources are not following our students typically on social media and so forth, but they will share things that they wouldn't necessarily verbally speak.
Yeah.
So I just appreciate you. I know that middle school specifically is definitely a hard time, and there's a lot of uniqueness and some hard situations that have come up specifically in recent years that I feel like you've probably not had to deal with previously. So
Yeah.
I know it takes a special person for middle school, so I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Yes, I spent 3 years at middle school. I started middle school when I started counseling, and you are, hit the nail on the head. Middle school, I've always said our middle school counselors are, you have to be passionate about that stage of development, because it is from 6th to 8th grade. It is so different, and you never know what you're going to get. That's how it is at all the grade bands, but middle school especially, and I'm really, really thankful for our middle school counselors and the work that they do. So I want to introduce you guys to our high school counselor. High school years are full of growth, promise, excitement, frustration, disappointment, and hope. It's the time when students begin to discover what the future holds for them. And high school counselors have an impact on these years by helping students achieve optimal personal growth, acquire positive social skills and values, and set informed career goals, and realize their full academic potential to become productive, contributing members of the world community. I'm excited to introduce you all to Lori McCormick. She's a school counselor at Gallatin High School.
Good evening. My name is Lori McCormick, and I'm in my 8th year serving Gallatin High School, the most diverse and one of the largest high schools in our county. And it's also my 18th year overall in this profession. A typical day as a high school counselor is, well, never typical. Imagine me spinning plates. The plates represent the academic, career, and social and emotional needs of the students in my caseload. The plates must remain spinning and balanced. I cannot allow one to stop spinning or to become unbalanced, because then it will disrupt the others. My phone is always ringing. My email inbox is always full. My office is a revolving door of students and often surprise visitors. Prioritizing tasks, smiling through stress, and flexibility are my superpowers. I am a school counselor. Academically, I support 425 students in my caseload. I register new students from our district, our state, out of country, homeschool, and even those that have not been enrolled anywhere. I assist administration with master scheduling. I create a custom, individualized 4x4 block schedule for all 425 students, while keeping in mind their IEPs and 504 plans. I complete transcript reviews to ensure timely graduation throughout the school year. I monitor failing grades, make adjustments for credit recovery, and walk families through attendance issues with hopes of avoiding truancy throughout the school year. I create plans for students that are behind, and often create another plan, and maybe another plan. In the summer, I send failure and retention letters to invite students and their families to come and participate in our summer credit recovery program. I monitor GPAs. I consult with teachers and parents to determine the best way to assist their student. I find solutions for families when elements of school are proving difficult. I meet individually with my underclassmen to help create a plan for their future and to select their classes. I assist with major testing programs such as EOCs, PSAT, ACT, and AP exams. I create plans for those wishing to graduate early. I gather the details needed for senior recognition and graduation. I am a school counselor. I meet with my seniors individually to discuss their future plans and career goals. I offer career inventories. I organize College App Week. I promote opportunities within college, technical schools, workforce, military, and scholarships. I stress deadlines. I encourage resume writing. I ensure all eligible seniors apply for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. I promote FAFSA completion. I complete letters of recommendation and common application recommendations. I answer questions about college, admissions, financial aid, and housing. I walk through the college-going process with my students and very often their parents. I am a school counselor. Students are struggling socially and emotionally. Effects of the pandemic on mental health are monumental. For high school students, as with the other levels, many have not experienced a normal school year in 2 years. In my opinion, many students' emotions and maturity have significantly declined because of this. Many lack coping skills, self-regulation, and the ability to de-escalate challenging situations. Others have grown fearful and anxious. I have an open door. I listen. Students discuss conflict, disappointment, grief, neglect, anxiety, anger, depression, disappointment, hopelessness, fear, indifference, abuse, and apathy. Again, I'm there to listen. I guide conversations to problem solve and teach coping skills. I assist with volatile students. I make referrals for students that need more than what I can provide in the school. I bring calm to the students' chaos. When students come to talk, all of those other previously mentioned tasks come to a standstill. The mental health of my students is always my top priority. I'm honored when students are brave enough to trust me with their feelings and their circumstances, because there's nothing more vulnerable for them in that moment. I am a school counselor. I'm passionate about my career and grateful for the opportunity to share with you tonight what we actually do. We are multitaskers, problem solvers, counselors, advocates, encouragers, and trusted adults to our students. We are one person to support many in our caseloads. Our greatest influence on school culture and classroom environment is to support our students in their time of need. When we empower our students to improve their decision-making and problem-solving and relationship skills, we unleash a prepared generation into our communities. We are school counselors. Thank you.
I'd like to ask something and then
Yes,
say
ma'am.
something.
Okay.
I assume from what you were saying, y'all are doing it by a section of the alphabet.
Each school sets it up a little bit differently. At Gallatin, we have one counselor that has all of our ninth graders, And then for our other 3 counselors, we do divide alphabetically, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So I serve the end of the alphabet for 10th, 11th,
I
and
just
12th
wondered,
graders.
y'all have, I know at least 4 counselors, don't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Why you don't do it by, like, say you're coming in, you take the freshmen and follow them through, so that it would cut a lot of your work, because everybody's having to relearn these students,
Sure.
and do it by year and do it that way. I don't understand. Of course, you may have very good reasons for why you like it the way
When
it
I
is.
was a student at Gallatin, it was divided up,
Right.
and we shared the same counselor for all 4 years.
Yeah.
It's very difficult when you are the senior counselor and have 300 to 400 seniors that you're doing all of the senior activities for, the letters of recommendation, transcript checks, all those things. So it's been good to blend it. So we have a team of us helping the entire senior class, for example.
Yeah.
So, but each school does it different. So it is unique to see how each school chooses to handle it.
And it is the largest.
I knew we were close. I wasn't sure, but I knew we were up there. Yes, ma'am. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Mr. Daniels had a question, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just, I want to say thank you for coming out tonight and sharing with us. I mentioned this, I think, at our December meeting, that a lot of times people hear counselors and they think, just say no. They think Red Ribbon Week. And you all are involved in so much more than that, in impacting in children's lives in ways that many people don't even understand. You know, I find it amazing how you all have to constantly evolve as well and constantly learn what the latest trends are, what's going on in the world, the way students consume media today. I mean, I think we're at the point now, you know, where no kindergarten student has ever lived in a world where there wasn't an iPod type of device. And the way that we're consuming media and the music that's out there, the types of shows that are on network television that, you know, we would have blushed at when we were growing up watching, well, actually we didn't know what the Golden Girls was back then. Maybe we blush now. Anyway, I don't know. But I mean, just the things that these students consume. You know, I have a student in elementary, there are 2 in elementary, 1 in middle now, and a senior in high school. And you know, you talk about the number of students you have. I've got 4 kids with different personalities that all learn in different ways and have different passions and things they love. And so trying to find ways to connect with all the different kids that are learning in different ways and coming from different environments, I commend all of the work that you do. I do have one question though. My wife's a nurse and she spent a number of years, she's at Sumner Regional now, but she spent a number of years in the ER of Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. And she has this ability to compartmentalize some pretty traumatic events that she witnesses and was involved in on a daily basis. And I know that as counselors, they're often involved in some situations that can be pretty traumatic. And even though she has that ability to compartmentalize, there are times that she came home and she just broke down. Just the stress, and just over time it just wears on you, and you just have to be able to take a breath and get all that stress out. What do we do to help our counselors in those situations to deal with the stress that, their students are dealing with stress, but now they're taking on this responsibility of trying to solve all these problems and help all these kids succeed. And that's a monumental task in itself. So what do we do to help the counselors?
Well, that's a great segue into my role as a counselor coordinator. Let me see if I got this on. Sorry, y'all. I will say, to answer your question, and you guys might want to chime in too, you know, three things that really frame my role at the beginning of the year. I introduced myself to our counselors, many of which I knew, thankfully. But 3 things that kind of frame my role is relationship, support, and advocate. And one of the things that I do the most, and then I'll kind of go to the next slide. What I did is I took these 3 things and they shaped my role as a counselor, and I wanted them to shape my role as a counselor's counselor. And that's kind of how I see myself. I spent a lot of time supporting these individuals. I spend a lot of time in their offices on the phone with them. I'm a sounding board for a lot of them. Lori calls me about weekly, and I don't mind it, but it's been nice. I know if I was in their role, I know I would be appreciative. I can't tell you how I'm so fearful of letting them down because they're such a great group of counselors. Like, we have such a great group of counselors, and I feel so fortunate and blessed to get to serve them. And so what I want to do with my role is starting off with just building relationships. And so I've spent these 6 months just going to the schools multiple times, calling them, getting us together. One of the things, some of the things that we do is I not only just talk to them and listen to them and help them work through some of these issues, help them find solutions to problem, be kind of their counselor, give them somebody to talk to bounce things off of, and say, I'm hitting my head against the wall. This is what has always worked. This year it's not working. And what are other schools doing? So it's been nice to get to talk to everybody, because then I can say, you know what, I can get you in contact with this person over here because she's got a great solution for this, or he's got a great solution for this, or just getting us all together in the same room. We haven't done that in a long time. So just getting us all together to be able to talk and share. Another thing that I feel like I do on top of listening is just providing opportunities to advance their clinical skills. One of the things that I felt like as counselors is especially as my last 6 years as a high school counselor, we get in the weeds with the numbers and the course codes and the scheduling and all that, and we're still counselors, and we got into this to be counselors. And because the world has changed so much, and it changes every year, and we got to kind of be up on our game and know what's going on and what our kids are dealing with. And so one of the things that I did this year is our November 1st PL day, I brought in a licensed marriage family therapist, and she did a whole session on reframing anxiety. And the way I framed that day is I wanted it to feel like my counselors were getting some counseling, like they were getting poured into, they were getting a moment to kind of exhale, but also I wanted them to leave with new strategies. We did a case study. So at the end of that time, we were kind of learning and learning some new ideas and topics centering around anxiety. But then at the end, we circled around a case study, and 5 or 6 counselors, and you can see that in this slide here, counselors kind of get together and they talk about, how would you handle this? How would you handle this? And they get to just share ideas. And I think that's the biggest thing for counselors and you're exactly right, Mr. Daniels. I mean, I know for me going into it, and I know y'all have heavy days, and we have to kind of walk out with it. And what I always said is I need to be able to sleep tonight. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to support that kid, that I know that even if it feels overboard or it's one phone call too many, I want to know that I've done everything I can to help this child today, and I'm going to be there tomorrow. And our counselors all do that. And so I'm just really, really, really thankful to get to be in this role, that I get to just be with them and support them and hear what do they need. So that's my first thing. And then my second goal is just supporting, just to kind of play off of that as well. Just some other areas of support, just coordinating opportunities to be together, getting us all in the room and saying, what problems are you dealing with? What problems are you dealing with? What bright spots do you have? What are things that everybody's doing? One of the things I want to highlight, Ms. Lass and Mr. Sadler are two of our counselors in this county that do the care teams, those groups, and working with our Safe Schools, Katie Brown, we're going to be expanding those in the future. We're going to be expanding those throughout the district. Our counselors are going to be trained, so more schools are going to be equipped and teachers are going to be equipped to be able to offer those groups like they are, and they're going to be a great resource because they've been doing it for a while. And those groups, the students can refer themselves to those groups. I know with Ms. Lass's, parents can also refer the kids to the groups, but for a student to be in a group, they do have to have parent permission. So it is all of those groups and counseling happens, parents know about it, and we make sure to seek their permission. Is it something that they want their child to participate in? Some other areas of support that I've been really excited about over the last 6 months is with our senior meetings. One of the things that I got together, the high school counselors at the beginning of the year, I said, okay, it's college app weeks coming up, scholarships, all the things. What do you all do? Let me hear. And we did a Zoom meeting and everybody just kind of shared. And one of the things that came out of that, I had a principal come to me a couple months after that and say, the senior meeting I did, that was a really good idea. Our counselors they did this or this or this, but they didn't put it together and necessarily as a package and present these to the seniors and kind of help them with a package walking through the senior year. So we just share, and I created a counseling hub. So we're not reinventing the wheel. All the counselors are doing great things, and so we put it all in one central location, and they can pull from that and not have to come up with new ideas. They can pull from what everybody else in the district is already doing. And then the high school registration consultations. I mean, we talked at the curriculum guide meeting last month about the 4-year plan. I've been meeting with all of the high schools and talking with their registration teams. What does registration look like for you? What are your pain points? What are your areas that you love and that you want to continue, and how can I help? And connecting them to resources. And from that came today's Skyward training and other areas of support that we offer our schools. And then lastly, my last goal is just to be a trusted advocate. I feel like our school counselors have the potential to be a big impact on their school leadership. Some are part of their school leadership team, but they have this unique ability, as you've seen, to see kind of what lies beneath the surface and dig deep into the needs and uncover potential that's not only in their students, but in their school community at large. And this counseling work is delicate, and coordinating counseling specific related to their clinical skills, like I shared, has been one of the most important things. We did a training at the beginning of the year on self-harm and some specific strategies on how can we help kids that are self-harming, reframing anxiety, and then even just getting our schools together in their school cluster. That's been an awesome thing that they have loved, getting elementary schools counselors talking to the middle school counselors, talking to the high school counselors. They're all serving these students, K through 12, and they have really enjoyed getting to talk to each other and what do you need from us? What do you need from us? What is it going to look like? And they've really enjoyed those conversations too. So ultimately, I just want our school counselors to feel the same way that I wanted my students to feel, that I see them, I hear them, and that I know them. I believe that they are some of the most prized and awesome people in this district, and I want them to know that they have a supportive person that understands them and that will do whatever I can to help them figure out and solve their problems. I believe our counselors have been called, and I tell them this all the time, I believe they've been called to be right where they are right now and to serve the students that are in their building, and I believe that nobody can do it better than they can. So thank you for this position. Thank you for listening to us. I know it's kind of lengthy, but we really appreciate it. And are there any questions or anything?
Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, I just want you all to know how very thankful I am for the work that you do. And you mentioned that you want your students to know that, to see you, to know you, to hear you. And I think it's important for the rest of the community to see you and to hear you and to know you as well, because oftentimes I think you aren't as emphasized as you should be, as much as you should be. I am so happy to see that there is so much more emphasis on mental health. I think for a long time, I think a lot of people think of school counselors as dealing with career planning and scores and tests and whether you're absent or not. And I am just so thankful that mental health is receiving the attention that it really needs to. And with that in mind, right now, Gallatin High School is hurting very badly for the loss of their coach, Jerry Landers, last week. He was my daughter's volleyball coach, and I'm just hurting. But I saw that you all had extra grief counselors available, and I was curious how that works, what that looks like. Do you bring in extra people or what?
Mm-hmm. Would you like to speak on that, Katie? I want to give her props for that.
Well, actually, that's our crisis social work team, and that team came into existence about 3 years ago, and we've been able to expand it, and they have been invaluable in those kinds of situations. There's 6 of them, and they are all assigned different schools, but when something like that happens, we group them together and they're able to be there and support. Oftentimes they're there to support the teachers as much as they are to support the kids. We even used them to support one of our local schools that's not public when they had a student fatality. And it was just really nice to be able to support the community as well with them. So they're an excellent resource, and they're available to all the schools. And it's nice because we used to have to pull counselors out of their buildings in order to do that. And on occasion we will still do that if needed, but that's a really good resource. And so I'm glad that you felt they were supportive.
Yeah, we're very thankful for the crisis social workers, and there are 6. And I don't know, I mean, I know I feel like I was on the phone with them weekly, and it was a huge relief just to know that as a counselor that I can do as much as I can do, and then there's going to be somebody else that cares just as much. It's going to take on, and they're specifically trained masters in social work. And yeah, we're really, really thankful for them and Katie's team. So.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Mr. Wise?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, let me thank you all for what you do. We appreciate you. And I'm going to ask a question in a few minutes, but I want to give you an assignment for tomorrow. Please and I think I know this board well enough to know that I can speak this for them. Let all of your counselors in every school know that their board appreciates them very much. Thank you for the work you do and the reasons you do it, and the methods that you use, and the empathy that you use. We appreciate that. Do we have a full-time counselor in every one of our schools?
We, I would say almost. So it looks like it's kind of based on numbers. We have pretty much one counselor at all, but I want to say maybe 3 schools. And North Sumner, Oakmont, so some of our really tiny elementary schools have a part-time counselor, and then that part-time counselor splits another role. Some schools have 1.5. And so that part-time counselors, I think all of our counselors are full-time. So some of them split to 2 schools, but some of our smaller elementaries just have a half-time, part-time counselor.
Okay. I have said it before, school nowadays involves every aspect of life. Where when Mr. Gregory went to school back in that one-room schoolhouse, they didn't care about your home life, or didn't have time, and there were no counselors, there were no school nurses, that sort of thing. There were no principals. But at any rate, where we have come, especially in where we are in our world today, 3 years ago, it was a bad thing if you went in public wearing a mask, unless it was Halloween. Now, you're frowned upon if you go in public without wearing a mask. Now, they don't think of you as a potential bank robber. Back then, they did. But for what you do, I do want to say thank you. I know this board would want you to let all counselors know in our school system tomorrow that they are appreciated. Thank you.
Will do.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Mr. Daniels, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to...
Yeah, I just, well, one quick comment. I want to say, I know Miss Tinsley, grown up with her and know her and love her, and she's a phenomenal counselor. And, with the passing away of Coach Landers, I'm glad you're at the high school. And Miss Brown, your comment about the grief counselors, I know we've got those on staff that are helping some of the students, because they've got some relationships. But it's good to hear that these grief counselors aren't just there for the students, they're for the staff as well, because these staff members have had a relationship with this coach a lot longer than maybe some of the students, the parents, and so it's good that they have that resource as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Gregory?
Again, thank you. I noticed all 3 of you made one comment: the pandemic. And I'm quite sure that has brought a lot of stress in families. Of course, that means students, which brings it into schools. Where we attend church, we have a counselor now that started and Mr. Sadler knows about this, I'm sure. May have had a job offered to you, I don't know.
No,
We won't let him go.
but I know him. He's a good guy.
But anyway, one day a week, because of dealing with the stress that has gone in. And plus the fact, my wife's now youngest daughter has a similar position, I think, that you do in Warren County, Kentucky. I don't know exactly what she does or you do either, but of course they've had the tornado to deal with. I think she works out of what we call the central office, but she also serves 3 schools. And I think she gets referrals from the counselor within the schools that ever what. We never talk about it, so and so I do know the job that you do. Know it very much. And it's a lot to do. You won't get caught up tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gregory, Miss Andrews?
Yeah, one, I want to say formally welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being in this role. I know, speaking with some counselors and so forth, that your position is something that they were very much looking forward to. As kind of you've mentioned before, you know, our counselors are, they have a unique role in our schools, and they see and hear and process things that that a lot of people don't. And so to have someone in a professional role that they can go and can be their sounding board and so forth is just instrumental, because when you try to pack all of that into yourself, you know, you talk about privacy and so forth, that, you know, it's not like they can necessarily just go to another teacher and say, oh my gosh, let me tell you about what's going on with this kid. There's a professional privacy there that they can't do that. So to have someone in your role that they can come to and share and unpackage and just say, oh my goodness, you know, you think nothing is going to surprise you, and then something does. So I just want to say thank you for being there for our counselors. Our counselors are monumental for the work that happens in our school system. I know there's been a lot of discussion tonight, specifically talking about the pandemic and so forth and how that's affected our students. And obviously that's something that we recognize and acknowledge, and it is. But also I was wondering, could you just touch on too, just like over the course of maybe the last few years or so, how social media has also affected our students, and like what y'all are seeing within the schools, and maybe, you know, guidance or so forth for parents to just be aware of and have, you know, some, their eyes maybe opened or so forth that maybe they didn't realize prior to that. I feel like that's something that is kind of like, oh yeah, there's social media, but I do feel like it is playing an intricate role in the lives of our students, and like I said, in their mental and social and health.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And you guys feel free to chime in, just from your experience. I think I would start off by kind of referring to what Dale said about the brain. And one thing that I would have conversations with parents about, usually if a parent would call, and often they'd call, you know, I don't know what's going on with my son, especially at the high school level, even middle school, but I don't know what's going on, you know, he's different, or he's angrier, you know, just kind of a list of things. And one of the first things I would say is this, does he have his phone in his room at night? I'd ask about video games, and usually I could pinpoint it pretty quickly to what's going on. Like 9 times out of 10, it was access to phone 100% of the time, and especially with boys, access to video games. The console is in their room. They're playing socially with friends online. You know, I think the thing I would want parents to know is, you know, the apps and the things that the students are engaging in these days are created and designed to create addicts, to create this need to constantly refresh, keep scrolling, and never put it down. And the brains of these children, as they develop, just can't handle it. And they really can't handle it. I mean, even adults, really, a lot of us can't handle it either. So let alone you give that to a child, seeing kids that, are 8, 10 with phones or with some of these devices, and especially with devices with no restrictions. And what I've found is that parents just don't know. I mean, they don't know. And it's the age we're in is everybody has a device, and this is, it's technology. And so I get that. And so that's why I would start my conversations with parents that way, is, asking some specific questions. And then parents that I've talked to have always been very open to just tell me what to do. Do I need to you're going to take that phone at this time every night, you're going to take it. When you go to bed at night, that phone's going to be in your room. It's going to be turned off. You don't know how much of a favor you're doing to your child by letting them get away from that device, because they don't feel that they can. If that phone lights up, they've got to respond, because there's social implications on the other end of that if they don't respond right away. Would y'all agree? And so they have to respond right away. And so that's the biggest thing, I think, is in allowing parents to know, like, it's okay to take that phone. They might be angry at you for a little bit, but eventually they're going to be really thankful because they're getting sleep. And they can blame it on you. They can blame that they didn't respond to their friend last night because their mom took their phone. You can be the bad guy. And it's going to end up being a good thing for the kid. So that is one thing. And then same thing with video games too, just limiting the time on them. But speaking specifically to social media, elementary, middle, and even high, I mean, it's and I know we've all probably said this before, they don't get a break from the social pressures, from what's going on, and there are implications if they are not attached to that social media and available at all times. And that's how the apps are designed, but that's also just the just peer pressures that they're experiencing. So anytime parents can just interject and intervene and just take that blame, they may not like it at first, but if they can just take that on and say, we are going to cut it off, and on these hours on a Sunday we're not going to be on it, or these hours at night we're not going to be on it, this is family time, this is whatever. I know ultimately it will be to the students' to the child's benefit, because they just can't handle it. It's just not. They just can't. Would y'all have anything else to say? Okay.
I would say too that we've considered actually doing some parent nights.
Yeah.
Where they are looking for direction. This is new for all of us, and raising children with the exposure to electronics the way it is, we're all kind of feeling our way through it. I know the Department of Homeland Security comes in and does some talks in some of the middle schools and high schools, and specifically talking about different types of apps that are kind of dangerous and what to be aware of. And I think that needs to be across the board. I've got elementary students who have social component to their gaming systems too. Yeah. They're playing other 5-year-olds and other 7-year-olds. So it's pervasive across all grade levels and ages. I've also started including that in my guidance lessons, specifically about electronics. The kids want to know how it's affecting their brain. They can learn. They can just say, I need to put that down for a little while. My brain needs to rest. That's part of that brain science that we do. Your amygdala needs to be able to calm in order for it to do it. It doesn't need to keep getting overstimulated. And we talk about the brain being overstimulated, and they get it, and they understand that. And sometimes they're the ones telling their parent, Mama, put your phone down. And saying, I wish I could spend more time with my mom or my dad, but they're always on their phone. So sometimes these kids are the best voices to speak up, to bring some change too, because it's all new for all of us adults as well, because some of us are hooked. And so we have to hear from the mouths of babes sometimes that we need to put it down. But I think a lot more, just education on what do we do, what are some guidelines, what is appropriate, what are some rules that we can follow in our household that make sense. And so, yeah, we're actually coming up with some parent nights to address that.
And it's a lot easier to put some boundaries and restraints in there initially than it is to backtrack and try to take it away.
Definitely.
So
And I will say, I mean, I feel like, I don't know about y'all, I felt like counseled as many parents as I did students a lot of times. Lots of long conversations on the phone, helping parents get through something, and giving them concrete things that they could do today. I don't know about you guys, but and I enjoy that. I think our counselors enjoy being able to be helpful, even in that, you know, that's going to impact the home too.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back in the beginning of 2020, this board had to pivot and set some goals and work real close with the administrators. And we've had some major successes in making lemonade out of the lemons that came out of 2020. We've seen that with some of the video classes that we've captured. That's just one example. The curriculum, allowing our teachers to focus their planning time, not on planning, but getting better. I think this position is going to allow our counselors to coordinate together and to better assist our students. And I can't imagine anything better to come out of a pandemic than that. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And I don't want to take away from anybody's presentation, and maybe it reflects on me, but Miss Lass actually communicated better with me, and I think that speaks volumes about. Well, I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Bachman.
Okay, thank you. I'll be brief here, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, not only for the school board, but as a grandma, because you've affected my grandchildren, and I appreciate all that you have done. And thank you so much for what you shared with us tonight. You have opened up our eyes to a lot of things that we weren't sure of. We know you did a great job. We're very appreciative of you, and we can't thank you enough. And Katie, thank you for all you do to work with them as well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Langer?
Yes, I just wanted to wrap up. I think you can see, you know, Ms. Kane mentioned earlier that her counselors are called to be where they are, and I think you can quite clearly see that she is called to be where she is, and she's really done an outstanding job for us thus far, and it's really exciting, Mr. Duncan, to see what's going to come down the pike from that. I think I wanted to highlight one thing that I felt like they did an exemplary job talking about is, you know, one of the things I think to talk about 2020 that we really pushed as we were learning how to deal with COVID was we're all in this together. And where I think our counselors have been pivotal leaders for the district is they've always been in that driver's seat of coordinating with parents. I mean, it's this thing as simple as, you know, they mentioned groups that they do with kids. Well, to do those groups, they have to contact each set of parents and talk and say, hey, we've got this wonderful group that I think will be really beneficial for your child. And they do a tremendous job of connecting and helping and coordinating and, you know, sometimes helping parents. Because, I mean, you know, all of us, when we've raised children, we've hit different stages where it's like, I have no idea, like I need some help. And to have people that work with hundreds of kids every day is just so beneficial. And I think the work that often gets overlooked that they do is they do so much work to communicate with parents and to connect and to coordinate with parents. And what you really begin to see is when you have strong counselors, it makes the whole school and the whole system work so much better because it you just see like we all get on the same page and we all move at the same way. And our kids can then feel the love and support that they have from across the board. So thank you all so much for coming out to speak, and thank you, Ms. Kane, for presenting and sharing.
Thank you, Mr. Lackford. I just have one quick thing to say before we move on to the next item. God bless you. God bless you. What a ministry you guys have. That is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Next item on the agenda is discussion and or action regarding the revision to policy 6.205, assignment to schools. Dr. Phillips.
So I think I mentioned back maybe a couple of months ago that the state, I think we've had actually a conversation 2 times, one in regard to Liberty Creek and then one when the law actually passed back probably last June or so. But the state passed a law that will go into effect for next school year. So it was kind of this whole school year. It's already been law. It was signed into law last May. I think I have it here somewhere. May 3rd of 2021. So it's active now, but it actually will not go into effect until the 22 school year. So gave us kind of an entire year for school districts to get geared up to comply with this law. if you remember, I mentioned to you that I thought there could be some changes coming, but we don't really know what those changes will look like. So we were going to go ahead and implement what we felt like would be, and what we know the law currently says in regard to how to treat out of zone. And so this gets into, for those of you that have been on the board for some time, out of zones that our parents request within the school system each year. And over the last 7, 8, 9 years, we have really reduced the total number of out of zone students that are in buildings across the county. And I think that's a good thing. That's why we have residential zone. That's why we have zoning. So the students that are zoned for that particular school go to that school. Sometimes there's a reason that parents ask for out of zones, and sometimes in our current policy, the principals would approve that, and then sometimes they would deny it. Often, in our current world, that would be managed by me based on capacity of the building. And the number of students that are currently there, the number that we're expecting to be there, whether it's consistent or whether it's growing in a growth area. And so all of those factors went into me telling a principal, well, you can't accept out of zones or you can't. Does that make sense? Because it just depends. For us, we've been in a very restricted environment because of our growth and capacity. Capacities within our schools across the county, pretty much the entire time I've been here, we've really had very, very few schools that had space to accept out of zones. Often you would see it maybe in 9th grade. You would see some high schools take out a zone. You would see some maybe in some elementary schools, but most have been restricted for the entire time that I've been here. So what I'd like to do is have a conversation. We've got two things here. I'm going to pass around the state law that actually was passed, and just take one. It's front and back. I'm basically going to explain to you kind of what this says, but you can read it, obviously. Take it with you. And this has to have 2 readings because it's a policy that will require a change for 2 readings. We are gearing up for our first lottery. So what does that mean? It means that our current practice of accepting out of zones will no longer be applicable. And that's not something that this board is choosing to do. That's something the state has said. If you're going to have open seats, you have to advertise those. And you have to do that through a lottery process so everyone has an equal fair shot, right? You don't have the principal out there deciding who's going to get in and who's going to not get in. If you advertise that you have open seats, then you're going to do that randomly, and you're going to let every parent that chooses to apply for those open seats to apply. And if you say we're going to have 25 seats in the freshman class at Westmoreland High School, if you only have 10 people that make application in that window to go, you don't have to run a lottery, right? All 10 get in. If you have one more, 26, guess what happens? Run the lottery and one person doesn't get in and 25 do, right? So every year, the new law, every year we will have to publish that, and I'll have to come up with that based on capacities within the schools, and we'll publish it. Parents will be able to apply through the current system. I think I mentioned this in December about Liberty Creek. The current system that we use for Union will be the same system that we'll use. It's an outside vendor. Parents apply. We let them run the lottery on the specified day. And then that vendor contacts the parents and says, hey, we ran the lottery and you were accepted to be in that particular school for your out of zone request. So we got a couple of changes happening here. State law is going to dictate that we change how we do out of zones. They are going to allow us to leave current out of zone students in their school. Now that's important Because if you're on an out of zone currently, and you want to stay, we're still going to be able to, under the law, and allow you to finish that grade, that school building. If you're at Schaefer on an out of zone, that does not mean you're going to get to go to Gallatin High School out of zone. It means you're going to get to finish Schaefer out of zone. Does that make sense? Okay. Doesn't mean the next building. It means that building that you're currently in. So our current out of zones will not be bumped, right? We just won't be accepting any new ones for any school unless we publish, announce, and run a lottery. Okay? Or if we don't have enough students to fill up those slots, then obviously everybody would be in. So it's a couple of different changes there. I think there's some confusion out there. We had this conversation specifically about the new legislation from the state, but we also had it in conjunction with a little bit of Liberty Creek zoning. So there's some confusion out there. They are not the same thing. They're not the same thing. We have Liberty Creek, we have a Liberty Creek zone that's set, and then we have the new law that will affect every school. It has nothing to do with the other. And I think there's a little bit of confusion out there with parents. I do know from speaking to principals in December that principals have communicated this as parents have started to show up like they have every year. They do every year. Parents that are trying to get an out of zone to a particular building that they're not zoned for, they start showing up usually this time of year. After Christmas, before spring break, is usually when they show up and they ask the principal, hey, I want to go out of zone. I need the form to fill out for an out of zone. Now, because we have the new law, the principals they're not giving them the form, right? But because we can't give them the form. We can't take them new out of zone unless we publish it and do it according to the law. Does that make sense? So just trying to get everybody kind of up to speed. The policy that will be impacted will be assignment to schools, and we've gone through that, struck most of it, put in the language that the law, which is why I gave you a copy of the law, kind of put in the language that the law requires us to put in, which basically spells out by March 15th of every year, which we're trying to do ours this year in January, February. But by March 15th of every year under the law, we would have to publish those open seats and then run a lottery, obviously, prior, I think it's 30 days prior to school opening. Obviously, in our system, we would want to do that much sooner because of staffing and other things. We only have 3 schools that this year, and one we've already published, but 3 schools that I think we have opportunity for parents to apply for out of zone because of space. Liberty Creek, we've talked about that. We have Liberty Creek. I think that's information's been published quite some time. Back in December, I think it was out, so parents know that. I know we've had a lot of conversation and parents asking about that. So Liberty Creek information's already been out there. We'll run that lottery. I think the window opens Monday. So if parents, we'll push that back out again, but if parents go on, if they want to open seat at Liberty Creek, they can go on and fill out that application. It's very, very simple, and they can submit it. They'll get receipt that they've been entered into for an application into an out of zone. If we do not obviously reach the number per grade for Liberty Creek, then everybody would get in. That applies. If we go over the threshold per grade that I've set, then we would run the lottery, obviously. 2 other schools, I've spoken with both of these principals about this already. Mr. Wilkerson, Westmoreland Middle School, Westmoreland High School. And the number there, we'll probably do an application for out of zone for 6th grade and for 9th grade. In those schools. They have capacity to do it. as far as the size of their building and the number of students they have currently enrolled. That would be the only other two where when you look at those factors, we're not already close to capacity or at capacity. Okay. So that's kind of the dynamics that are happening here. I'm not going to read through the policy change, but this policy assignment to schools, please be sure and read through that. It does still allow, and the legislation does as well, two things. One, the full-time employee exemption. We just took the existing language. All of you are aware of that. If you have an employee that basically they are not considered an out-of-zone request, they can send their child wherever they want to go. That's still true, and the law still allows that. There's also the policy, the language here, it's also consistent in the new law that parents can ask for a hardship. They can petition me for a hardship if it's specific to programming or some really extenuating circumstances. They can ask for that to happen. When this bill came up last year in legislative session, I had a little bit of conversation with our legislative delegation, and they were able to put some language in that that allowed for some flexibility with me being able to place students because of those circumstances. I won't get into it, but you guys know sometimes we have things happen off campus. We have other things that occur between students, and it's necessary either by state law or best practice to separate those students, which means one maybe would have to go out of zone. And so we needed to have a little bit of flexibility to do that. And this policy change is consistent with the law, and it allows us to do that. Transportation still, for anyone that does the lottery or asks for out of zone, is still the responsibility of the parent. That was consistent with our old policy. That's still the same way. Athletics are still governed by the rules of TSSAA, or the Middle School Activity Association. And we did leave in our policy, the new draft policy, we did leave about out-of-county students, even though we haven't accepted any since 2013. JJ, what did we have? One? We have one student left that one senior left that we grandfathered in 2013. Do you guys remember that? May of 2013, we said no more out of county, and we grandfathered all of those in, and we're down to one student that's a senior. So we did leave that. We do not accept any out of county because I felt like it's probably good to have that in policy, even if that one, obviously after graduation, we don't have any, but it's good to leave it in the policy that we're not accepting. We don't accept it. We get calls every year. From parents that live in Robertson County or live across the line or across the bridge in 109, and they ask us if we accept out of county, and of course we tell them no. We haven't since 2013. So you may have questions, and I'll be glad to answer them. You can read the law, and then this goes through two readings, but we wanted to get this in front of you before we actually open the window for parents to request out of zone to Liberty Creek or to Westmoreland Middle, Westmoreland High, in those specific grades.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. Clarify. So right now, say a student at Gallatin High School wanted to go to station camp. They go to the principal at Gallatin and say, hey, can I get the form? I need you to sign it. And then the principal at station camp would have to sign it as well. What you're saying is that with this policy, just for clarification, is now that doesn't have to happen, because if we say there's spots available at station camp, then that parent could go and apply to be in that lottery, and then the results of that lottery would determine if they go to that school or not.
Exactly.
All right. The second thing is just, and I know you mentioned that athletics are governed by TSSAA. Just because Liberty Creek is a new school doesn't mean that goes away. If I played football at station camp and I'm not zoned for Liberty Creek, and I apply to go out of zone to Liberty Creek and I get in because I started my window during that year as a sophomore at station camp, I can't play football that next year at Liberty Creek, correct?
Correct.
All right.
You'll be
I can play
eligible
that
for a
that
year.
second Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted and I thought that was true, and I just wanted to clarify that.
And that's a good point too. I think we had our first athletic meeting at Beach High School. Went well. We're out there on the Liberty Creek zoning.
Yep.
Not necessarily this change, but the zoning change, out there trying to answer those questions for parents that have student athletes that will be zoned to Liberty Creek, and they're participating currently at their zone school. How will that impact them? And obviously, the answer is if you're being zoned to a different school by the school board, then you're automatically eligible. If you're not, then you're pretty much ineligible. I mean, there's some nuance to some of that, but that's pretty much it.
So basically, the current rules apply. Because I'd heard a little bit of chatter of, it's a new campus, so because I played here because they didn't offer it here before, then I'm good. And I said, no, I don't think that's true. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that I was correct. So
That's
all
right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes. Piggybacking on what Mr. Daniel said, just because I also had this conversation come up today, specifically football, because next year they are having to play an independent schedule through Liberty Creek. They still, however, are part of TSSAA, and that is still part of it's not because they're playing independent, they get like a bye year. It still does count towards their eligibility, correct?
Correct.
Okay. To clarify as well, when you say Liberty Creek will have the lottery, specifically it's just Liberty Creek High School. We are not offering a lottery for the elementary nor middle school.
Yes, thank you. I probably said Liberty Creek, but you're 100% correct. It's only Liberty Creek High School. So Liberty Creek High School will have that window for parents to apply that opens Monday, the 17th. That window will there will only be slots for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
And then also, I feel like, so a couple of things, just chatter that I've heard amongst parents, and I feel like some confusion, just so that we can clarify, is a couple of things. One is I feel like that there are parents who feel like I am being rezoned out of Beach High School to go to Liberty Creek, and so I'm just going to apply for the lottery at Beach High School. There's actually not a lottery for Beach High School. There's only going to be a lottery this year for the 3 schools in which you mentioned.
That's correct. Yep.
And so, again,
So like there will be no new out of zones at Beach High School because there will be there won't be any.
right,
But there won't be any in Hendersonville either.
right.
The only way that you can accept them would be a couple of ways. One, because I placed them there for some extenuating circumstance that parents have petitioned or there's been an issue at a school, and that's the best for those students. Or if we publish the seats. And if we publish the seats, then just like we're doing for Liberty Creek or for the other 2, Westmoreland Middle, Westmoreland High School, it would be grade specific for those slots, and parents would be able to go on there and see it and then make application, and then it would be a random computer drawn deal.
Or if they become a full-time employee of our school system, and then
Right.
they would have the option to do that
True.
as well. The other part of the confusion, or maybe just a clarification for parents to be aware of, is that just because we have capacity at these schools this year and we are running a lottery for these schools this year, it does not guarantee that we will also have a lottery next year for the same schools. I feel like because of Merrill Hyde and Union, we always have an incoming kindergarten class for them,
Right.
so we do have a lottery every year for them. But that is not necessarily a guarantee for these schools, and most likely not a guarantee as our county continues to grow and capacity at the schools build.
Exactly. So, perfect example would be we may run a lottery we are running a lottery with open seats for freshmen at Liberty Creek, right? Okay. Once we do that this year, next year, we may not run one at all, or we may run one, but it only has half the seats it did this year. Does that make sense? Because you got to continue, based on the law, we got to make sure once we give them a seat in that open application window, they can stay forever. They can stay for that building. So if we let them in as freshmen, we've got to accommodate them there until they graduate, right? So you want to be careful not to overload yourself to say, hey, we're going to take out of zone students, and then in zone students, are crowded.
And I think that I'm glad that you touched on that as well, because that's another thing is parents have asked if they get accepted and then the school starts to fill up, they're not going to get booted. If they are accepted as a freshman, are guaranteed at that point, as long as the parents continue to want to provide the transportation and they want them to attend, then they can stay through the duration of that building.
Our old policy, that is true. The only caveat to that would be the law. Once you read it, you'll see this. The law and our old policy and new policy also say that if they have poor academic performance, absentee issues, the principal can revoke it. So just because they get in that first time, if they have if they behave and they have good academic performance, then they'll get to stay.
Gotcha. I think for parents to realize, if you have, say, an incoming freshman and then you have also a current, say, sixth grader, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get my freshman in this coming year. When my sixth grader comes, we'll run the lottery and we'll try to get them in as well. That actually may not be an option by the time that sixth grader gets to high school. I just think that parents, as they are making the plans for their family, need to be aware that it is not the lottery specifically for our middle school, high school, any school, not including Union and Merrill Hyde, I should say, that it is not guaranteed that there will be a lottery for any school any year after this year besides
Correct.
those two.
That's exactly correct.
Ms. Brown?
I want to see if I understand all this. So our ones that we put in are going to allowed to stay in that building, whatever, if it's the elementary or whatever building it is, as long as they behave and they're there. Now, but the principal can send them back if there's a problem. All right, can they do that with the state ones?
So
And
I
the
don't know.
lottery ones?
So yes,
So they can send those back also.
they can.
But until then, they're guaranteed the building also.
That's right. It's the same for both.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, I just had one point of clarification just on something that Ms. Andrews was asking about. So the lottery is going to be for 9th through 12th at Liberty Creek. That is for the student in that building, correct? Not the family itself. As in, if I've got a child that, let's say hypothetically, I've got a child that goes to Schaefer and, Benny Bills, and I'm zoned for Gallatin High School or Rucker Stewart or whatever it is, and I've got another student that gets into the lottery. That doesn't mean my other two students are now going to be able to get into the middle school and the elementary school. They're still at that same school because there's no out-of-zone requests or students being accepted at the elementary middle school level, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
100% correct.
Yes.
It is by student, by year. The only thing is once you get in, if you have a student get in, it does not guarantee other students within your family would get in.
Yep.
But it does guarantee that the student that does get accepted into that slot, proper, good behavior in academics, they'll be able to stay until they finish that building.
Yeah, because I could see some parents thinking, I've got younger kids and my, sophomore just got in, and then it's, oh crap, I've got other students that now I've got multiple campuses I'm going to, and I've got to figure that out. So walking into it with that mindset is I think, important for them to understand, because they've got to make that decision.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of this, when you look at it from just a sheer management standpoint, a little bit of this, if you did it that way, you're doing this because you're saying that you have some open seats and capacity. But if you do it that way, especially in a growing district like we have, you could really tie yourself up for 5 or 6 or so years, 7 years with siblings, and you won't have the space when those students come through.
Yeah, I get it. I just wanted to make sure that we.
Yeah, it's really a by student, by year thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Is that all on this subject? All right, moving on to the next one. Discussion interaction regarding revision to policy 6.203, school admission.
All right, so these next two, 6203 and 6206, as we looked at the assignment to schools policy, there was some language in there about a couple of things that we thought made better sense in these two policies. And so we just cleaned that up a little bit. There's really not a change to existing policy represented in either of these policies. It's really more of a relocation of existing policies. What we moved was language talking about students transferring in from another school district that had been an alternative school program and stuff like that. So we just felt like it was going to read easier and be cleaner if we moved them into these two policies. The last policy, 6409, the state has added some additional reporting requirements, and so we just updated our policy to reflect that.
All right, that covers them all, doesn't it? Any questions?